My name is Alara Vance. For the first 19 years of my life, I lived in the quiet, predictable rhythm of a small university town, Havenwood. A place nestled in a valley where mist clung to the oaks in the morning and the biggest news was usually the outcome of the college football game. My world was one of library stacks, the scent of old paper, and the gentle hum of a campus perpetually cycling through seasons of study and release. I was an art history major, a girl who found more companionship in the silent gaze of a painted portrait than in the boisterous crowds at a Friday night party. My life was my own, a canvas I was just beginning to prime. That all changed the year my father, Robert, decided to remarry. He was a good man, a quiet architect who had been adrift since my mother, Catherine, and her relationship with the bottle had fractured our family years ago. I wanted him to be happy, I truly did. But his choice, a woman named Isabel, felt less like a partner and more like a whirlwind. She was vibrant and beautiful, with a laugh that could fill a room and an ambition that seemed to burn behind her bright, clever eyes. She was also pregnant. At their wedding reception, held in the botanical gardens under a canopy of twinkling fairy lights, Isabel pulled me aside. I assumed it would be a moment of forced bonding, a promise to be friends. We stood in a small, wisteria-draped alcove, the sound of the string quartet a soft murmur in the background. From a sleek leather portfolio she'd somehow stashed nearby, she produced not a sentimental keepsake, but a document. It was a schedule, laminated and color-coded, detailing the first year of her unborn child's life. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, she said, her voice a melody of sweet reason, are your days. I have my yoga intensive and some crucial networking dinners. She tapped a perfectly manicured nail on the glossy page. Weekends, we'll split. You can take the mornings, so Robert, and I can have a little bit of us time. It's so important to maintain the romance, don't you think? I stared at the grid, at my own life sectioned off and assigned without my consent. My plans for a summer internship, my part-time job at the campus gallery, my own fragile social life, they all seemed to evaporate under the clinical precision of her chart. Isabel, I started, my voice barely a whisper. I have classes. A job. I'm trying to build my own future. She laughed, a light, airy sound that didn't reach her eyes. Oh, sweetie, your little art career can wait a bit. This is a helpless baby we're talking about. She placed a hand on her stomach, a theatrical, protective gesture. Little Leo needs you. The refusal I should have voiced, the firm and simple no, caught in my throat. It was her wedding day, my father's day. I had spent years of my childhood learning to walk on eggshells around my mother's moods, learning that my needs were secondary to keeping the peace. It was a lesson I hadn't yet unlearned. We can talk about this later, I managed, the familiar words of avoidance a bitter taste in my mouth. But we never did. The schedule was never mentioned again. In the months that followed, there were no updates on the pregnancy, no further discussions of babysitting. A part of me, the part that shied away from conflict, convinced myself that maybe she had reconsidered, or that something had happened. I didn't ask. I retreated back into the comforting quiet of my life, letting the silence grow like a wall between my father's new world and my own. 3 months later, the wall came crashing down. I was in my dorm room, surrounded by a fortress of textbooks, cramming for a midterm on Renaissance iconography. My phone buzzed, and Isabel's name flashed on the screen. I'm outside, she chirped, as if we'd just spoken an hour ago. Confused, I pushed aside a stack of books and peered out my window. On the manicured lawn below, Isabel stood waving, a bundle of blue blankets cradled in her arms. When I met her downstairs in the lobby, the cold autumn air clinging to her coat, she thrust the bundle at me. It was a baby. He was tiny and warm, smelling of milk and powder, his face scrunched in sleep. It's Monday, she said, her smile bright and unyielding. Your day. A wave of disbelief washed over me. Isabel, we never agreed to this. The schedule. Don't be difficult, Alara. I told you this was the plan. Her eyes flickered toward the parking lot. Anyway, I have to run. My facial appointment isn't going to attend itself. And just like that, she was gone, her luxury sedan pulling away from the curb before I could form another protest. The baby, Leo, began to cry, a thin, piercing wail that echoed in the sterile lobby. I knew the resident advisor would be getting complaints within minutes. Defeated, I packed him into my beat-up car and drove the 20 minutes back to my father's house, the house that was no longer mine. The keys I still had felt foreign in my hand. Inside the quiet, empty house, I called my mother, a desperate, foolish hope that she might offer some guidance. Her words, when they came, were thick and slurred. You should be thanking her, Alara. Isabel is finally making a real woman out of you. I didn't argue. I just sighed and ended the call, the familiar weight of disappointment settling over me. I looked down at the infant in my arms, his big, dark eyes staring up at me, his crying having subsided into soft, hiccuping breaths. I considered my options. Calling Child Protective Services felt like a declaration of war I wasn't ready to wage. So I held him. I rocked him and walked the floors of my childhood home all night, the pages of my textbook forgotten. When the first gray light of dawn crept through the windows, I knew I would fail my exam. Isabel arrived the next morning, fresh-faced and unapologetic. She reached for Leo, but I held him close. Isabel, I said, my voice shaking slightly. This is your son. I'm a 19-year-old student. I can't be your full-time nanny. I didn't mention the exam. I didn't want to guilt her. I just wanted her to be a mother. She nodded, her expression one of perfect understanding. Of course, sweetie. You're right. No problem. Her voice was like honey, and I should have known then that it was laced with poison. I saw them only in pictures after that, smiling family portraits on my father's social media page. Until the night of the first real snow of the year. I was asleep when my phone began to vibrate violently on my nightstand. It was my roommate, Chloe, her voice frantic. Alara, get here. Now. It's the baby. He's at our door. The words didn't make sense. I threw on clothes and ran the 5 blocks from my boyfriend's apartment back to my dorm. The scene in the hallway stopped my heart. Chloe was standing over a small bundle on the doormat, her own sweater wrapped around it, her face pale with shock. It was Leo, wrapped in nothing but a thin, damp towel. The heating in our old dorm building had been broken for a week, and the air in the hallway was frigid. I snatched him up. His skin was like ice, his lips a terrifying shade of blue. We raced to the campus health center, a small, quiet building that was suddenly a blur of motion. A nurse took one look at Leo and her face went white. As she rushed him back, something fell from the folds of the towel. A small, folded piece of paper. A note. Had to catch a last-minute flight to renew our vows. So romantic. Thanks for watching him. Love, Isabel and Robert. My heart plummeted. In the sterile waiting room, nurses and doctors moved with a swift, terrifying urgency. They wrapped Leo in thermal blankets, hooked him to monitors. I heard one of them mutter, "Core temp is 94. The words meant nothing and everything. I started calling my father, Isabel, anyone. Voicemail. 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 A woman with kind eyes and a tired smile approached me with a clipboard. Alara? I'm Ms. Albright, from Child and Family Services. Do you have a moment to talk? My head was spinning. I followed her into a small office, the scent of stale coffee thick in the air. She told me they had found bruises on Leo's back, small, finger-shaped marks that were days old. My mind couldn't process it. She asked about my relationship with Isabel, about the schedule from the wedding, about the note. I told her everything, my voice a monotone of shock and exhaustion. A campus security officer knocked and entered, holding a tablet. He showed Ms. Albright the security footage from my dorm. There, at 3 a.m., was Isabel's car. She got out, looked around, and placed Leo on the cold tile floor. The timestamp showed she was gone in under 30 seconds. My phone buzzed. It was my father, finally calling back. I stepped into the hallway, the sound of slot machines and canned laughter tinny in the background. He was in Las Vegas. He told me I was being dramatic, that Isabel said I was just making things up for attention. I tried to explain that Leo was in the hospital, that his life was in danger. Don't you dare ruin this for us, Alara, he said, his voice hard. Isabel deserves this vacation. He hung up. Back in the office, Ms. Albright informed me that they were taking temporary emergency custody of Leo. A wave of relief so profound it felt like grief washed over me. As we walked back toward the pediatric unit, my phone lit up with an automated email from my professor. Due to my missed exam and lack of communication, I was now failing the course. No makeups. No exceptions. Later, sitting in the hospital cafeteria, staring at a cup of tea I couldn't drink, more messages came. A text from my mother, "You're ruining your father's happiness." Again. That word, again, was a gut punch, a reference to the time I'd finally, tearfully told my father about her drinking, the confession that had led to their divorce. In her narrative, I was the villain then, and I was the villain now. Chloe sent me a screenshot from Isabel's Instagram. A photo of her and my father, clinking champagne glasses with the Bellagio fountains erupting behind them. The caption read, "Living our best life. #Vegas vows #second honeymoon." It had been posted an hour ago, while her son was fighting for his life 3 states away. That night, back in my dorm room, Chloe pulled me aside. She still had the baby monitor app on her phone from a time weeks ago when she'd helped me watch Leo for a few hours. It had a feature that recorded audio when it detected noise. Her face was grim as she played the recording from the night of the snowstorm. Isabel's voice, clear as day, captured from the hallway outside my door just after she left Leo. "A couple of hours in the cold won't kill him," she'd said to someone on the phone. I recognized my father's indistinct murmur in response. He needs to learn independence. And she needs to learn what responsibility looks like. The chilling callousness of it, the calculated cruelty, settled in my bones. I stared at Chloe, and in the quiet of our shared room, I felt a shift inside me. The part of me that had always sought to keep the peace, to smooth things over, began to die. In its place, something new and hard began to grow. This wasn't just about a failed exam or a ruined vacation anymore. It was about a little boy who deserved to be safe, and a woman who would stop at nothing to get her way. I didn't know how, but I knew I was about to turn her entire life upside down. My own quiet life was already gone. I had nothing left to lose. The days that followed were a disorienting spiral. The university's administrative board summoned me to a disciplinary hearing. An anonymous source had reported me for violating housing regulations by keeping an infant in my dorm room. I sat before a panel of stern-faced academics, trying to explain the impossible circumstances, but their faces remained impassive. I was placed on academic probation. My father sent a barrage of texts demanding I delete the slanderous posts I was supposedly making about them. Isabel was already spinning her own narrative, painting me as a troubled, jealous stepdaughter. I learned from the pediatrician's office, during a follow-up call with Ms. Albright, that Isabel had added my name as an authorized caregiver and emergency contact 6 months prior, long before Leo was even born. This had been premeditated. Ms. Albright called with more disturbing news. Medical records showed this wasn't Leo's first bout with hypothermia. There was another admission 2 months earlier at a different hospital, with a different caregiver listed, a neighbor who had subsequently moved away. Isabel had been testing the waters, seeing who she could manipulate, who she could abandon her child with. Then, a text from an unknown number. "She's done this before. Please help." The sender identified herself as Jenna, Isabel's 16-year-old sister. Before I could reply, the messages were deleted, the number blocked. Someone was watching her. My mother called again, drunk and rambling. "You have to think about family loyalty, Alara. You're acting just like you did with your cousin Tyler." My blood ran cold. Tyler. I was 8 years old when he died. He was 15, my mother's nephew, staying with us for the summer. The official cause of death was an accidental fall down the stairs. But there had been whispers, hushed conversations that stopped when I entered a room. My mother had been the only adult home at the time. The memory, long buried, surfaced with a chilling new clarity. The web Isabel had woven was intricate and suffocating. A woman from a different CPS department, Marissa, began appearing wherever I went, the library, the coffee shop. She'd smile and wave, her work badge clearly visible, before pulling out her phone and typing furiously. I later learned she was Isabel's best friend from high school. At the bank, I discovered the source of my father's anger. He'd been making weekly deposits of $500 into a joint account he shared with Isabel, labeled Alara, Childcare. She had been collecting $12,000 for babysitting services I had never provided, all while building a case that I was an unfit and unreliable caregiver. The final blow to my academic life came when my boyfriend of 6 months broke up with me via text. His parents had heard the rumors and decided I was too much drama. Unstable. Desperate, I drove to our family's storage unit, a place filled with the ghosts of my childhood. Tucked away in a box of old yearbooks, I found my diaries. But as I flipped through the pages, I saw entries in a handwriting that was an almost perfect imitation of my own. Entries I had never written. "I'm so excited to have a baby brother. I told Dad and Isabel I'd watch him anytime. I can't wait to be a big sister." The ink was faded just enough to look authentic. Tucked inside one was a manila envelope. Inside were forged medical consent forms, all signed with my forged signature, dated months before I'd ever even held Leo. I began to document everything, but it felt like trying to build a sandcastle against a rising tide. Isabel launched a GoFundMe page, "Help Us Fight False Accusations," which raised thousands of dollars from my father's colleagues. She posted tearful videos of her reunions with Leo at his new foster home, which, I learned from Ms. Albright, was with Isabel's cousin. In every video, Leo screamed and arched away from her. The comments section overflowed with sympathy for the heartbroken mother. My own mother staged a scene outside my dorm, screaming that I was an ungrateful daughter trying to destroy the family. Students filmed it. The videos went viral on campus. The day I was fired from my job at the gallery, a process server was waiting for me. My father, mother, and Isabel had filed a joint restraining order. I was legally barred from coming within 500 feet of Leo. My own parents had sided with his abuser against me. That night, in the sterile quiet of a cheap motel room, my phone rang. An unfamiliar number. The voice on the other end was calm, steady, and filled with a pain I recognized. "Is this Alara Vance? My name is Carol Gable. I am Isabel's first mother-in-law. I think we need to talk." Carol Gable lived in a small, tidy bungalow across town. Her kitchen smelled of cinnamon and grief. Over cups of chamomile tea, she laid out the full, devastating story of her grandson, Max. The patterns were identical: the unexplained bruises, the accidents, the slow poisoning of family relationships, the accusations against anyone who raised a concern. Her son, Isabel's first husband, had fought for custody for 2 years before he took his own life, leaving a note blaming himself for ever trusting her. Max, now 5, had permanent developmental delays from a fall he'd sustained at 14 months old, the same age as Leo. Carol had saved everything: medical records, threatening texts, her son's journals. As I looked at the photos of a smiling, vibrant young man, and then at the medical charts detailing his son's injuries, I saw the full scope of Isabel's monstrousness. She didn't just neglect, she systematically destroyed. Our meeting didn't stay secret for long. The next day, Isabel posted on social media about my cruel harassment of a grieving family, complete with a photo of Carol's house, taken from the street. My father texted me then. "Isabel is pregnant again. Congratulations, you're going to be a big sister." When I didn't respond, he sent another. "Why are you doing this to us?" The manipulation was so transparent now, yet it still stung. Desperate to get the truth out, I agreed to an interview with a local news station. The segment that aired was a hatchet job. They used party photos from my freshman year, edited my statements to make me sound vengeful and incoherent. Isabel's tearful, composed response aired immediately after. Time was running out. CPS, citing the stress my actions were causing a pregnant Isabel, was expediting the reunification process. The final hearing was in 72 hours. Fueled by a lead from Carol, I went to the county clerk's office. And there I found it. The key. On Leo's birth certificate, the space for the father's name was blank. My father had no legal rights to the child he believed was his son. At a 24-hour diner, fueled by caffeine and sheer will, I pieced it all together. With help from a paralegal friend of Carol's, I cross-referenced names and dates. Leo's biological father was a man named Mark, Isabel's wealthy married boss. Bank records we managed to access showed he had been making large monthly payments to her, payments that looked exactly like child support. She had been defrauding them both, collecting money from two men for the same child, all while that child suffered. I knew a courtroom confrontation was my only chance. But Isabel was always one step ahead. After a staged confrontation at a local Target where she threw herself into a display and screamed that I had assaulted her, I was arrested. The night in jail was the lowest point of my life. I was released the next morning to an eviction notice on my apartment door. From a new motel room, I agreed to one last, desperate plan with Carol. I would give Isabel what she wanted. I would apologize. I called my father and, voice trembling with rehearsed remorse, begged for a family dinner to make things right. He agreed. That night, at their house, I delivered a performance worthy of an Oscar. I cried. I apologized for being jealous, for misunderstanding, for causing them so much pain. And under the table, a small recording device Carol had given me was running. Isabel, gloating in her victory, couldn't resist. She described everything. How she'd left Leo on my doorstep to teach me a lesson. How she'd forged the diaries. How she'd orchestrated the entire campaign against me. "You have to be smart, Alara," she'd said, smiling over her wine glass. "And you, my dear, were just so easy to play." My heart soared. I had her. But when I took the recording to a lawyer Carol knew, my hopes crashed. We lived in a two-party consent state. The recording was inadmissible in court. Isabel had known. She had confessed freely, fully aware that her words could never be used against her. The next day, an emergency injunction was delivered to my motel. Isabel was claiming my stalking was causing complications with her new pregnancy. I was barred from the entire county, effective in 48 hours. The walls were closing in for good. At 3 a.m., 2 days before the hearing, a text from Jenna, Isabel's sister, came through a new, untraceable number. "She's faking the pregnancy. She has a hidden medical report at the hospital recommending against reunification. Get it to the judge. Now." Using a volunteer badge Jenna had left for me in a library book, I entered the hospital after hours. The records room was silent and cold. My hands shook as I typed Isabel's name into the system. And there it was, buried deep. A psychological assessment from a child development specialist recommending permanent removal of Leo from Isabel's care due to patterns of escalating neglect and suspected factitious disorder imposed on another. It had been marked as reviewed and filed, but had never been submitted to the court. I printed it, along with records of 3 separate complaints from daycare workers about unexplained bruising on Leo, all of which had been withdrawn after private meetings with Isabel. As I fled the hospital, clutching the papers that could save a little boy's life, I knew I was now a fugitive. I overnight the package to the presiding judge anonymously. My last, desperate shot in the dark. The next morning, I watched from across the street as police cars surrounded the local high school. They brought Jenna out in handcuffs. The hospital had discovered the security breach. She looked across the crowd, found my eyes, and mouthed a single word before they pushed her into the car. Go. My choice was stark: turn myself in and try to help her, or see this through to the end for Leo. Her sacrifice, her single-word command, made the decision for me. I started the car and drove toward the one place I was legally forbidden to be, the county courthouse. Snow was beginning to fall as I arrived, the flakes soft and silent, an eerie echo of the night it all began. My father was waiting on the steps, his face a mask of cold fury. "Leave, Alara," he said, blocking my path. "If you go in there, I will testify about your instability. I will tell them everything Isabel has told me. I will destroy you." I looked into the eyes of the man who had taught me to ride a bike and build sandcastles, and I felt a profound, aching sorrow. "She's dangerous, Dad," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "And you know it. If I leave, we both lose him forever." Suddenly, a shrill alarm cut through the air. The courthouse fire alarm. People began to pour out of the building, confused and annoyed. Through the chaos, I saw him, a man in an expensive suit, briefcase in hand, marching toward the steps with an expression of grim determination. Mark, Leo's real father. Under the courthouse awning, as officials herded people away from the building, Mark and his lawyer made their stand. He announced to anyone who would listen, reporters, court officers, my stunned father, that he was Leo's biological father, and he was there to claim his son. His lawyer produced a folder thick with evidence, DNA results, texts from Isabel admitting the paternity, proof of her financial fraud. Isabel, seeing her world collapsing, pushed through the crowd. In her panic, she stumbled, and something bulky and flesh-toned slipped from under her coat, falling onto the snow-dusted ground. A silicone pregnancy belly. The gasp from the crowd was a collective, audible shock. Her entire deception lay exposed on the courthouse lawn. She tried to run. Carol Gable stepped into her path, and Isabel, in a final, feral act of desperation, swung her purse, striking the older woman across the face. Security officers tackled her before she could go any further, her screams echoing off the cold stone of the building. The judge, robed and furious, emerged to declare that all custody proceedings were suspended pending a full investigation. My father sank onto the steps, a broken man, staring at the fake pregnancy belly melting into the snow. In the ensuing chaos, my mother, implicated by the audio recording I had released, was arrested for perjury. And then a final, heartbreaking piece of the puzzle fell into place. A young woman, no older than 17, stepped forward from the crowd, clutching the handle of an empty infant carrier. Her name was Emma. She was Leo's birth mother. Homeless and desperate, she had sold her baby to Isabel for a sum of money disguised as an adoption fee, a transaction that had never been legally finalized. I looked at Emma, at Carol, at the wreckage of my family, and I felt not victory, but a vast, hollow emptiness. Later, inside, away from the flashing lights and shouting reporters, Carol found me. She took my hand, her grip firm and warm. "It's not over," she said, her voice a promise. "But it's a beginning. For Leo. For Emma. For all of us." I stood there, looking out the window at the falling snow. My old life was gone, buried under months of lies and betrayals. I had lost my family, my academic standing, my sense of safety in the world. But in its place, I had found something else. A strength I never knew I possessed. A voice I never knew I had. The road ahead was uncertain, a blank canvas waiting for the first, tentative brushstroke. But for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to paint it myself. It wouldn't be a gentle landscape. It would be a portrait of survival. And that, I was beginning to understand, was a masterpiece in itself.